Victoria, should I begin? Okay. I'm taking my calls from Victoria Obregon, so thank you. I'd like to begin tonight by first of all welcoming all of you to our campus on a very beautiful evening. Today is particularly important. I believe it's Day Says, is it not? Which was very. Rick and I always. I'm the Frenchman and he's the Mexican, and I believe that battle had much to do with those two countries. We did this every day. You got Ronda Gonzalez, so I thought I would open with that comment. But what an honor to have all of you with us this evening. We are living through a pandemic and never quite certain what's going to happen, but for us to be able to make this happen tonight is something that we've been working on for a long time. It's a long time coming. It's 50 years of Chicano Studies, and that is something that we're incredibly proud of and proud to be a part of. All need to take a deep breath and realize what that means, but 50 years is a significant chunk of time for us to be devoted to this level of work. This week also launches Hispanic Serving Institution Week, and we are very proud to be an Hispanic Serving Institution and have been federally designated as an HSI institution since 2007. So we've got a little bit of history. About 14 years of being federally designated as an Hispanic Serving Institution. And often people ask, what does that mean? When your enrollment reaches 25% of your student population is Hispanic, it allows you to apply to the federal government for a designation as an Hispanic Serving Institution. And with that comes a set of responsibilities, but also federal funding through Title V. And Title V funding is funding that we've been very successful at applying for and getting, thanks in large part to the work of Dr. Derek Lopez. And Dr. Lopez, where are you? Dr. Lopez knows how to write a mean grant. And we have just benefited from his grant writing skills. And when you bring in Title V funding, it's capacity building that also allows you to serve Hispanic students that you're enrolling, and that obviously is also incredibly important to us. So this week launches our HSI month. Hispanic Heritage Month launched yesterday. It runs for 30 days. It runs until October 15th. And so this is really our kickoff. Tomorrow night, I just also want to introduce an event taking place tomorrow night that is the result of Ronda Gonzalez, my spouse, has invited a Valley Folklorico group from the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. The University of Texas Rio Grande Valley's Valley Folklorico group will be presenting tomorrow in our ballroom. And all of you are invited. It's free. We have a bar opening at 5. And then we've got the performance begins at 5:30. We'd love to have all of you and family and friends fill the ballroom tomorrow night for this pretty spectacular event with the Valley Folklorico group, which really complements the Valley Folklorico group on our own campus, which we are recommitting to with a number of resources, and I'm also very proud of that. So I mentioned Dr. Derek Lopez, which we remain grateful to, and all things related to the hard work. Tonight's event is sponsored through Title V grants from the Office of the President and also through our Vision 2028 funding. I'd also like to recognize the members of the committee who made tonight a possibility, and this week a possibility. So if you were in the room tonight and you were on a committee that made tonight a possibility, would you please stand so we can recognize and thank all of you who made this a possibility. So we'll start with, just please stand. Anyone involved? Okay, that takes us, I'd like, at this point, it's my privilege and my pleasure to introduce one of my 10 bosses. Armando Valdez is one of the 9 governors appointed by the governor of the state of Colorado to serve as on the governing board for the Colorado State University system. Armando is a rancher. He's also a faculty member at Adams State University. Armando is from the San Luis Valley. He is, what I want you to know about Armando is that he's been on our Board of Governors for 3 years. He is a very effective rhetorician and advocate for all things related to an Hispanic serving institution and anything related to how it supports our students on this campus. He is an advocate, and he's not afraid to use his voice and his experiences being a citizen of Southern Colorado. So that is incredibly important for all of you to know, is the level of representation from the Hispanic community that is on the governing board for the Colorado State University system. It's my pleasure to introduce our governor, Armando Valdez. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, President. Good evening, everyone. Bienvenidos. It's very exciting to be here. It's an honor and a privilege to be here representing the Board of Governors, but more so to be here among the community of Southern Colorado and here in CSU Pueblo. I am from Southern Colorado, very proud of it. I made a conscious decision to return. Thank you. That does applause. Very proud to make a conscious decision to return back to my community where I could work hard to promote more opportunities and more pathways for young Latinos and young Latinas finding those avenues for success as was laid for me during my time. We should be celebrating the long legacy of Chicano Studies here in Pueblo and here at CSU Pueblo, and I'm a beneficiary of the empowerment of Chicano Studies. Because of it, my parents were able to go to college, where previous generations before them did not have that same opportunity. And again, they prepared that pathway, primed the pump, got things going, so not only is it me, but for future generations, such as my son who's here tonight, for those who's going to have that pathway and that opportunity because of that legacy that has been set before us. Hispanic serving institutions, I do live it every day. Adams State University, another sister university as a state university here in the state, another HSI, and designated with that role and that charge to promote education in an egalitarian, democratic manner for education for all. And that's what we look at for Hispanic serving institutions, and the message that I take to the board and that I want to bring back from the board is that we are strong advocates and passionate about ensuring that HSI initiatives remain and continue for not only CSU Pueblo, but for CSU Fort Collins, CSU Global, and all of the universities in the state of Colorado and beyond. Because our goal should be not to have HSI designation to where it's a special superlative that highlights certain universities that serve Latinos and Latinas, but that all universities, and it becomes a normal designation, that all of our universities and colleges, community colleges, trade schools have 25% at least Latino population. So that's something we really need to look at. As we look back on the past 50 years of Chicano Studies here in the CSU Pueblo community, I want to think about and reflect on the culture, the heritage, and that legacy, because 50 years, as President Monte said, is a significant amount of time. But I want you to reflect only for a moment, because I want you to look forward to the next chapter and the themes and concepts that we're talking about: success, opportunity, and achievement for these next generations. This is what we're really pushing forward in trying to accomplish with these HSI initiatives, is closing these equity gaps, promoting the equal opportunity, and finding that education becomes that equalizer that takes people to those next levels of success. And so as we look forward in celebrating HSI, let's don't think about it just for a week or how it kicks off Hispanic Heritage Month. The satisfaction should only be realized when we're living and breathing that HSI mission, that HSI role on a daily basis. and that we see it from all over areas of our campus. Whether it's a faculty member in the classroom helping give some extra time to students, whether it's a coach on an athletic program working with them in practice, whether it's our advising office seeing what additional perspectives that student brings. In every single role, in every single area on campus, we should be constantly thinking about how are we truly serving our populations. Yes, it does have to be our Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx populations. But we want to expand this HSI designation to that it is engagement with a Latino, Latina community that is really empowerment to all students. HSI should not be solely designated to our Hispanic students. It is important that we have those services, and it's very important that we have and create pathways and decrease obstacles for those students. But I want everyone to consider, how do we get all students to understand that this HSI is a benefit and, again, empowerment to all of them. So as we focus on the panel and the esteemed guests that we have who are panelists tonight, I want us to reflect upon how do we continue this in our community, how do we continue this as employees of CSU Pueblo, how do we work as governing members of our entire system. These exact points of trying to promote and enhance our strategies and advocacy for educating everyone so they know what the importance of Hispanic serving is, Latina community engagement is, and success for all is. So thank you very much, and que viva en Pueblo. I'm very thankful for your hospitality, and it's, again, an honor and privilege to be here to share the night with you. I'm sorry that I won't be able to be here tomorrow night due to other conflicting appointments and commitments, but this is about celebrating throughout the year, and we'll be back. I'll be back, because we want to ensure that this is advocacy that we take forward to the future. Thank you, everyone. And as part of my role here tonight, to talk about the individuals and the people who make an event like this happen, I first want to thank Dr. Donna Suter-Hodge for the invitation to be here tonight. So without that, I wouldn't be here. I don't know if I know about it. So we have to have that outreach promotion. Thank you to Dr. Derek Lopez, who serves in that HSI engagement and HSI initiatives for the university on a regular basis, and is promoting that we live and breathe that on a daily basis. And then it's my privilege and honor to introduce our next speaker here tonight, Ronda Gonzalez, who's the director of the library and also houses the Eslan Center here at CSU Pueblo. We help promote those safe and welcoming spaces for students that may be first generation as well. It's an education for them to find out how to go to college as well as what they learn in college. And when you're first generation, your family goes to college with you, and how it extends out into the greater part of the community. And so it's people like Rhonda who do such a wonderful job to ensure that it happens for our community. So, Rhonda, thank
you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me just a moment to talk. Again, I'm Ronda Gonzalez. I'm the Dean of Library Services at CSU Pueblo. I've been at CSU Pueblo for about 21 years, and it's been my privilege to get to know a lot of you and work with you. So you might be asking yourself, why is the library dean have anything to do with Chicano Studies, and why is she talking to us? And in a lot of institutions, I think that might be true, probably just a passing relationship. But in our institution, the library has had the responsibility and the wonderful privilege of working with the Chicano community to develop a resource to promote and preserve the history of the Chicano movement. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. It's been about 10 years ago now, I think just over a decade ago, that we first met with members of the community, and 3 of those people that we met with that first day sadly are not with us tonight. Freddie Freak Trujillo, Rita Martinez, and Jose Ortega, and who I know you all love and respect very much. So they really guided our efforts and helped us to learn about this issue, and were our partners. So really we just provided the resources and the support, and they have been the guidance. So we together developed the Colorado Chicano Movement Archives, which are housed in the library's archives and special collections. And why is this important? We are working, and I don't mean to say that you all are, of a certain age, but let's just say that some of us, who might remember the Chicano movement aren't going to be around forever. And it's really important to gather up those resources and put them somewhere where the future generation can learn from what went before. So, and maybe that's an outgrowth of Chicano Studies on our campus. It maybe took 40 years to come to fruition, but we have people on our campus who really believe and are interested in this topic and have helped. And we have a very active community advisory committee, so I won't take time to list all of them, but if you are a member of the Colorado Chicano Movement Archives Community Advisory Committee, would you stand for to be recognized? In the last year, our archivist retired, and then we were in the middle of COVID, and we just weren't able to fill that position in the moment. So these folks have continued to work with me to help keep the effort going, and I'm happy to say that we are interviewing candidates next week for that position. So we will have an archivist again later this fall, so that will be something to look forward to. The next thing I just wanted to tell you about is, as like the next chapter of working with this group, some of us got together and we thought we really want to help Chicano Studies to flourish, and we really want the rest of the campus to know more about what we're doing with the archives. And we really want to continue to strengthen the relationship between the collections that we're building and the students who are in the Chicano Studies courses. And in addition to that, the administration came out with a new Vision 2028, which most of you have heard about, and if you haven't, one of the vision of our campus is to become the People's University of the Southwest United States by 2028. So we thought, this is the perfect solution. We need to be infiltrating the entire curriculum, not just the Chicano Studies program, but the entire curriculum at CSU Pueblo should have some regional flavor, so that students, when they're taking nursing classes, business classes, STEM classes, that they have a true understanding for the people and the history and the culture of the region that they're going to live and work in. So some of us got together, and I think Judy was in the room with me in the moment when we thought, what could this center be? We came up with the idea of creating a research center, which we have named the Aslan Center, because that seemed to incorporate in one word all of the things that we were trying to make it. We're like, well, it should be about the Southwest, and it should explain the people of the Southwest and their history and their culture, kind of like Aslan, that's what it is. So we have founded this new research center. It's only been in existence for the last 6 months, and already we have, and thanks again to Dr. Derek Lopez for giving us some seed grant funding, but we have hired an interim director. We've given out our first 4 mini grants for research and curriculum development projects, and we held our first summer institute where we brought about 30 community members, faculty, and staff members together to listen to Dr. Ramon Del Castillo and Dr. Karen Roybal talk about the importance of Chicano Studies and why that should be something that we teach at Colorado State University Pueblo. So we have 3 goals with the center. We want to promote research about the Southwest and particularly Pueblo's unique sort of role in the Southwest as the northern borderlands to the Southwest. We want to infiltrate the curriculum with that flavor and that knowledge, and we want to promote the Chicano Studies program and the community engagement with the community. So, anyway, thank you so much for giving me a moment to talk about what we've been doing. And with that, I will get on to the main event. It's my job to introduce the moderator for tonight and our current coordinator of Chicano Studies, Judy Baca, who most of you know. And Judy is a Pueblo native. She is a Salt Creek girl, born and raised, and has deep roots in this community and was involved in the movement, was an activist, and was here on our campus, I believe, as a student when the Chicano Studies program was being developed. And she told me that she took Chicano Studies classes and was very involved in that. I can say, well, and then I should say that she went on to get her graduate degree in social work at Arizona State University and then come back to our community to work here. And I thank you for that, Judy, instead of moving on to Phoenix or somewhere. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking on the role of coordinating Chicano Studies. I know it's been difficult. I know you have a full plate, and she does this, you know, on top of being a social work faculty member, and we appreciate all that you've done to keep Chicano Studies going. So let me introduce Judy Baca.
Oh, good, that's my teacher voice, right? Thank you, everyone who helped make this such a special event. Thank you, my speakers. I just can't say enough. My name is Judy Baca. I'm local, not local in the head, regional. I did think about leaving, but I was like Dorothy of the Wizard of Oz, you know. Once I left, I realized how much I loved my home. I grew up in a village. My village, some people would call it a barrio, but my village had a lot of my family. I grew up thinking everybody loved me, okay? And then I realized once I got out of my village, that wasn't the case. And I started, we were bus students. And then I realized how different we were from other folks because we were bus students. And during that time, I hated school. I was in junior high. In fact, some of you know I got thrown out of school sometimes. I always said it wasn't my fault, but I didn't walk away. And I wanted to drop out. So during this period of time, growing up and going into high school, in fact, I went on to high school like kind of on conditional. I better not screw up anymore, else I get thrown out of the district, which made me even hate school more. And then my father tried bribing me and said, if you graduate, I'll get you a car. Okay, but anyway, that wouldn't have mattered. What mattered were these people. Because during this time that I hated school, I wanted to drop out. You know, we weren't really the kids that people focused on. Sometimes we were labeled, we were not college material. We should maybe look at another type of area. And it was during the early 70s that I had a community member in our community, the Garcias, and we have generational family here, that they were involved in the movement. And we had the headquarters of La Raza Unida in Salt Creek. I was a teenager, and so I'd go and I'd take a look and check out what was going on. And I saw people like Carmen and Edmund and Eddie Montour and Al Gourlay and all kinds of, I mean, they packed this one area on Roselawn Street. And I was like so impressed. And some of their things that we're saying is, we need to get our kids in school. They need to graduate from high school. We have 50% dropout rate. I said, no, it's not a dropout rate. It's a push-out rate. They were dealing with economic issues. Louis Garcia, they called him the Lug, was dealing with some of our community neighborhood issues and the cleanup and some of the things that had to be done. I started developing, seeing people that became role models in my life. And when I told them I wanted to drop out of school, they said, no, you can't. You need to graduate. You need to think about college. I had already told myself I was not college material. When you're told enough times, you start to believe it. So I consider myself a child of the movement. I participated in some of the walkouts that were happening in the high school, and I think I have friends back there. Are you here that have walked out with me? We're only a handful from Central, but I'll tell you what, Centennial and East, they had groups of people that had walked out, you know, to go deal with some of the issues that were taking place. And these folks were part of those issues that were taking place. And I'm really happy and pleased that we can have them because they're part of our history, and this is part of recording our history. We're planning a year-long, today is like the first day, September 16th. We plan for it to go until September 16th of 2022. I've been around here a long time, so time kind of. And at that point, we want to have a major banquet and do a major end closing ceremony. But during this time, we plan on having the Rita Martinez Youth Leadership Conference, which has now been scheduled to May. We're planning the symposium to work in a lot of venue on Chicano and Chicano Studies in the research, and having people participate. The teatro, we want to have a celebration of our teatro, and where's Maria Vega, because she knows she's part of that. Maria. Maria's going to be our future speakers, because we're going to have continued panels. This is the beginning. This is the foundation. And there's a journey that we took that took us to this place 50 years. And we're going to be recording through the programming the journey that we've taken place the last 50 years. I can't believe I was a teenager and I've been here. I grew up on this campus, okay? I grew up here basically, and I consider this my home, and that's all my Pueblo view. We have some of the best views in Pueblo, if you haven't noticed. But I want to thank you all, and I want to introduce the speakers, and they'll elaborate more on who they are. But all of these people have had an impact in my life. A couple of them have taught in Chicano Studies here on campus and in the community. I consider them all activists, and they have made major contributions. We actually had a fourth panelist, Dario Madrid, who was part of the movement that made demands on the educational system regarding the need to hire. He gives his strong regrets that he could not make it. We're all getting older, you know, and I always say one day at a time. So I hope you'll enjoy our speakers. They're giving you information and knowledge that maybe has never been recorded. And I'll just go through real quick. Our first speaker will be Carmen Arteaga. She was a student activist, also an educator here in Pueblo, and had a strong impact in the movement and has made several contributions to our Colorado Chicano movement archives, as well as donations, but she's also part of our committee on the archives. And thank you again for coming in. And then we have George Autobee. George Autobee has also taught for us in the Chicano Studies. He's been a community activist. He was a student activist. He has his own business, and I'll let him kind of elaborate a little bit more. I left my paper at home. And so I want to thank, and then not only that, but part of George, he's also kind of comes from a state also perspective with what was going on. And I thank you, George, again for coming. David Marquez, again, I have to say, we go back a long way, you might not know that. Dave was one of the first Chicano Studies teachers that was hired for Chicano Studies at Central High School. He originally wanted to become an attorney, and he graduated from Colorado College. And interesting how Pueblo is, I have a lot of family all over, and he actually went to Colorado College with my primo, Robert Salazar. And so that was interesting that I just found out about. He's always been involved with many of the issues that have taken place on campus. He's always motivated the students. You wouldn't believe when I mentioned Dave Marquez. I mean, people say, I remember Dave. There was a picture I put on Facebook that had, I think you were in it, and it was all of your Chicano Studies and Mecha students. Yeah. So again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here, and I appreciate this. So we'll start off with Carmen, and thank you, Carmen.
First of all, I'd like to thank Judy for inviting me to tell my story on the beginning of Chicano Studies. I graduated from Centennial High School in 1967. I became a freshman here at it. It was SCSE at the time. At that time, we had dual campus. Part of the classes were on the Ormond campus. Part of them were here on the Belmont campus. At that time on the Belmont campus, all we had was the chemistry building, we had the library, and we had the Belmont dormitory, and then we had dirt everywhere. There was no landscaping to speak of. It was not the beautiful campus that you see today. So let me tell you a little bit about what was going on in the United States at that time. In 1963, Martin Luther King had just delivered his I Have a Dream speech in the People's March on Washington. President Johnson had just signed the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and the war on poverty was in full swing. I benefited from the war on poverty. My high school junior and senior year, my summers were spent on the SCSE campus as a student of Upward Bound. Betty Jo Tucker was the Dean of Women at SCSE at that time. She was also the director of Upward Bound. She became my friend and my mentor. The mission of Upward Bound was to take students from poor neighborhoods and provide them with the tools that they needed to be successful in college. And it also was to provide them with opportunities and experiences to widen their horizons. Many of you know that many of the students in Pueblo, they never get out of Pueblo, that Pueblo is all they know. And so I wanted to share this story with you as an Upward Bound student. We went on a field trip to Fort Lewis College, which was in Durango. And they had an Upward Bound program on their campus. So we mingled with the students. We also went to Mesa Verde. We went to Silverton. While we were in Silverton, my chaperone at that time, his name was Dr. Brian Osborne. Dr. Brian Osborne was he was a visiting professor here in Pueblo on this campus. He was actually from England, and he was also, him and his wife were the house parents at the dormitories. I got to know him very well because being an Upward Bound student, I lived on the campus, so I got to know him very well as a lot of the other Upward Bound students. But anyway, we were in Silverton, and we got hungry. It's time to eat. We went to a restaurant in Silverton, and on the door it said, no Mexicans or dogs allowed. I was 15 and a half, maybe 16 years old when this happened. So as a young girl, I was confronted with racism head on. I know the Upward Bound students got angry, and we actually said, we're going to go in there anyway. We don't care what that sign says. Who are they to keep us out? But our chaperone, this Dr. Osborne, he said, no, he says, we can't do that. He says, what's going to happen is that they're going to call the police, they're going to arrest you, we're all going to end up in jail, and we don't want that to happen to you guys. So he convinced us that that was not the time to make our stand. But anyway, early on, I tell you this story because early on, I was confronted with racism more than once. This particular story was a profound memory that I won't forget. But there were other times when I was confronted with racism. So the other thing I wanted to tell you is that when I was living during the summers I lived on campus, but the rest of the year I lived at home. Well, I was fortunate to have a father who was very much aware of his New Mexico history. He was from Pecos, New Mexico, and ever since I was a little girl, he would take us to the museums in New Mexico. We'd go visit my grandma, and he'd take us to the museum. And in the museum, he'd say, look, Hita, this is your grandpa, and blah, blah, blah. He'd tell us stories. So I had a very sound base of my history from my dad. My dad was a member of La Alianza. La Alianza, for those of you that don't know, was an organization created by Reyes Lopez Tijerina. Reyes Lopez Tijerina was arrested in 1967 for raiding the courthouse in Guerra Maria, and the issue was land rights, so anyway, my dad would talk to me about this. He not only talked to me about my ancestors, he would talk to me about Reyes Lopez Tijerinas, and he asked me, I remember I was a junior in high school, and he says, you're taking American history right now, and I says, yes, and I was taking this at Centennial. I remember my teacher's name was Mr. Sims, and he says, why don't you ask him if he knows anything about Reyes Lopez Tijerina? Ask him if he knows anything about the land that was stolen from us. So here I was, a junior in high school, and I said, okay, Dad, I'll do that. And I go to Centennial High School, I go to my American history class, and I ask my teacher these two questions. Well, of course, he had no clue who Reyes Lopez Tijerina was. He had no idea about the land struggle. So this is how I grew up, I had my father influenced me a lot, I was influenced a lot by Upward Bound. It was a war on poverty program. Other things that were going on at the time were, Cesar Chavez was organizing the farm workers, they were fighting for rights like, just the right to have a bathroom in the field so that they wouldn't have to, do their business in front of everybody. They wanted better wages. So Cesar Chavez was going on. Jorge Gonzalez at the Crusade for Justice was going on at the time at the statewide level, at the national level. They were organizing La Raza Unida Party because they believed that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party did not represent us. So there were a lot of things, there were a lot of political things that were going on at the time when I was just a young girl coming on the campus. I think most of all, one of the things that I attended, I was, well, before I even say that, let me say that Chicano students on campuses all over, statewide and throughout the Southwest, they were organizing and they were already protesting on campuses. They were protesting for, Chicano Studies and more professors that were relevant to our culture and that kind of thing. And what would happen is, I know here in Pueblo, as a college student, I would attend a lot of those statewide conferences. At the time, I was a student at Adams State College. I was working on a teaching certificate. I came here for 2 years. I transferred to Adams State. But at one of these statewide conferences, I met George. He was speaking at one of the workshops, at one of the statewide workshops. So, another thing that happened in 1970, I was a junior in college. I was at Adams State, and they had the LA moratorium against the war in Vietnam. Well, I went with a friend of mine. His name is Kiko Martinez. If I have time, I'll talk to you a little bit about him. But what I wanted to say about this moratorium is that it was the largest anti-war protest by Chicanos. They said that there were 30,000 people there, Chicanos that were there. I think that there were more, but that's what the newspaper said. So anyway, I was there, and I could talk a couple of hours just on that. But the point that I wanted to make is that at that time, Kiko and I went up a week early. And they had it so the Chicanos that were organized, and they had it so well organized, they had houses for us to stay in. The particular house that I stayed in was the house of a journalist. He wrote for one of the newspapers in Los Angeles. So I was at his house, and there were a bunch of us staying there. It wasn't just me. Well, at that time, they told us that there was a protest going on. There was going to be a presentation by a man by the name of Sal Castro. Sal Castro was a teacher in Los Angeles that had been fired by the school system in Los Angeles because he was organizing Chicano students, and they walked out of the school system in Los Angeles, and they were, what they were fighting for, more Chicano teachers, counselors, culturally relevant curriculum, that kind of thing. So anyway, I met this man. And again, like I said, I was a college student at the time. Another man that my host introduced me to was a man by the name of, his name was Julian Nava. Julian Nava was, he graduated from Pomona College. He went on and he graduated from Harvard. He went back to Los Angeles. He wrote a book, and it was called Mexican Americans, Past, Present, or Future. So I met him, and in my conversation with him, I was telling him that I was studying to be a teacher, and I wanted to make sure that my students learned about their history and their culture. Well, he took out his briefcase, he pulled out a book, he says, I wrote this book, and it was called Mexican Americans, Past, Present, and Future. He gave it to me. And so when I was 20 years old, that book kind of became my Bible. I used that to start writing curriculum, my own curriculum, because at the time, there was no Chicano Studies. We wrote the curriculum for Chicano Studies. I have never taken a Chicano Studies class. I have written curriculum for Chicano Studies classes. But anyway, this Julian Nava, and I found out later that in 1980, under President Carter, he was appointed as the ambassador to Mexico. So this man, I just met him at the Chicano moratorium, and he gives me, he sets me on my road to writing curriculum. He ends up being this ambassador to Mexico, and he was just this down-to-earth person, wanting to talk to me, wanting to help me. I think he was just as amazed at me as I was at him, because I was so young and he was so old, but yet we were together, we were working toward the same thing. So I think many Chicanos picked up the baton of civil rights. This whole time period was fighting for equity, fighting for your civil rights. You know, Chicanos demanded equity in education. They demanded equity in a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on education because we're talking about Chicano Studies, and that's what I want to talk about here. So at that time here in Pueblo, there were organizations like La Raza Unida, there were the Brown Berets, there was La Casa Verde, which my mother was president, my brother was in the Brown Berets, you know. I became very involved with La Raza Unida. La Gente were on the front lines, and so that was the times. That was just the time of me in college and you know, when and being in this world that was it was not the real world. I wasn't even working yet. I was just a college student. That's what was going on at the time. Well, then in 1971, I graduated from college and I got hired by District 60 as an elementary ed teacher. And I'll tell you what, that put me in the real world, you know, because I was nurtured when I was in Upward Bound. I had a lot of help. People were telling me it's important for you to go to college, and this is why, you know, and I was learning about statistics, dropout rates, and that kind of thing. Well, when I got hired by District 60, I started working in the public school system, and I found out that there were a lot of people that could care less about Chicanos and if we graduated or not, you know, and they could care less about our history, our culture. In fact, a lot of them held many stereotypes about our students, like Judy was talking about. You know, I remember one of my teachers at Grizzly. You know, I took a test when I was in 9th grade. 9th grade used to be in junior high at that time. And I remember I got the highest score in this test, and they gave us math, and I don't know if it was a standardized test or what it was. But anyway, I got the highest score on the whole school. And the counselor brought me in, and she tells me, she says, I don't know why the principal told me to talk to you, but he told me to bring you in and tell you that you got the highest score, and that's all she told me. She said, you can go back to class now. Well, at the time, I thought she was an idiot, you know, but as I grew up, I realized that she had a stereotype of me. She said, this girl is not going to go anywhere. She's not college material. I don't care if she graduated. I mean, I don't care if she got the highest math score in the building, you know. She did not provide any, she did not help me. That's another kind of racism that we had to deal with back in the day. So anyway, so while I was working, you know, for the public school system, I mentioned already that my mom had a community. She was president of a community recreation center. It was called La Casa Verde, and I started a tutorial program there. So I used to help the kids in the neighborhood. I would help them with their homework and whatever. I also got involved with La Raza Unida. And what ended up happening is that this Crecer tutorial program ended up, it led me to become the director of a Chicano school here in Pueblo. It was called Escuela Huichualopan. Escuela Huichualopan, mind you, all I had was a BA in education. I was an elementary teacher. I had 1 year of teaching experience. And I became director of this Chicano school. Because when we were young, and those of you that went through this with me, it was like, if we didn't do it, who would do it? You know, we were talking to the school district, we were talking to the school district about bringing bilingual, bicultural education. You know, we wanted Chicano Studies, we wanted more Chicano teachers, more counselors, more Chicano administrators. We wanted all of that. To deaf ear, the school board, they shake their head, and that's it. That's all we got from them. We never got any kind of a commitment. So we started our own school. And, we focused on the philosophy of, nobody could teach us better than our parents. We had parents teaching us our history, our culture. You know, we did tie in with, Spanish Peaks Mental Health, Roberto Quiroz was the director at that time, and he sent two of his mental health workers to our school, and they became our counselors. So we had our own school. It was called Escuela Huichualopan, and I was the director. It didn't last very long. Well, the building that we used belonged to St. Leander's. It was the old school. It used to be a Catholic school, and when they shut down the Catholic schools, it was empty, it was vacant. I wrote a proposal to the parish council, and they let us use the building. Well, that didn't last too long, because after they realized, and we explained what we were going to do, but I guess they got a lot of flack from different people, and they would not renew our contract. So our school did not last very long, but it was great while it lasted. I ended up going back to District 60, and we ran people for the school board, and we thought that was a strategy that would help us change, reform the school, and one of the people that ran for the school board, and she ran as a La Raza Unida candidate, her name was Trini Roybal. Her platform included Chicano Studies, hire more Chicano teachers, counselors, administrators. She did not win, but that didn't stop us. We continued to try to reform public schools. In 1972, 1973, I was a teacher at Parkview Elementary. I was on the curriculum committee pushing for bilingual, bicultural education. I actually wrote the first proposal for bilingual, bicultural education for the district. I handed it to the district, and I never heard from them again. I know they probably just took it in one hand and dropped it in the trash can with the other hand, But it never happened. They never approved bilingual, bicultural education. They never approved Chicano Studies. So anyway, when I was on this curriculum committee, like I said, I used to teach Chicano Studies before there was a Chicano Studies class. So I had a 3rd grade class, and I was teaching them about our indigenous ancestors, our family. I was teaching them about Tecumse and Vodka, and I was teaching them about mangas coloradas, and I was talking to them about them. And I was having my 3rd grade students write little essays about these people, Jeronimo, And then, as one of the culminating projects, we had a huge bulletin board in the hall. That bulletin board must have been about 12 feet by 6 feet. And I covered that with pictures of these our indigenous ancestors. And I put the essays that my students wrote on this bulletin board. And I wrote, the title of my bulletin board was Great Men Born Among All People. This is my 2nd year teaching. The teachers in that school had a fit, and they never told me anything, but my bulletin board was defaced. And what they wrote on my bulletin board in big letters, and I could tell it wasn't a kid, it was in adult writing, very nice handwriting. It said, hate promoters born among all people. So this is the kind of stuff that we had to deal with back in the day in District 60. We got OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, involved, and we got anyway, so we got the Office of Civil Rights involved. The teachers at that school, they actually went to the superintendent and complained about me. The superintendent brought me in and told me, Carmen, he said, and I was a 2nd year teacher, he says, do you know the reason, can you give me any reason why we could fire you? And I said, no. And he tells me, we don't need a reason to fire you. And he was making a reference to the fact that I was non-tenured, If back in the day, you had to work at least 3 years and then you became tenured. I was non-tenured. He says, we don't need any reason to fire you. So he was telling me to cool my wheels, get back in line, stop doing what I was doing. And he thought that I was going to accept that. And I told him, I said, oh yeah? Oh yeah? Also verbal back in the day. Oh yeah? You know, but anyway, I told, you know, I got the civil, you know, we got, with the help of La Raza Unida, the Brown Berets, there was a lot of pressure put on them. I did not lose my job, but I was transferred to another school. And I don't know if I have more time to talk or...
You're kind of running out.
Okay, so let me tell you real quick. Because it's, you know what, it's hard to cover 5 or 6 decades in 10 minutes. It really is. You know, but let me tell you this. You know, we organized in the community. We started a Chicano Barrio Education Committee. And we presented a list of demands to the school board. That didn't work out. You know, they would not accept those. We ended up filing a civil rights suit in 1974 with it was called the Federal Health, Education, and Welfare. The Chicano community was victorious at that time. The Office of Civil Rights said, you must do this. So we got a bilingual program. The district promised us a bilingual program by 1975. We did get Chicano Studies writing team. That's where I met David Marquez. He was on the same team with me. So I guess I will stop there, although I know I have a lot more to say than some of these
we need to bring everyone back. Phase 2. George. Thank you, Carmen.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. First thing I want is everybody stand up for a second. I know what it means to sit down for a while. Okay, that's enough. You can sit down. I want to share this with you. I am truly honored to be here after 50 years of us working together as a community to get Chicano Studies on campus. It was a battle, and we were victorious. But before I get to that story, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I became involved in the Chicano movement. But before that, how many of you know of Antifa? Oh my God. No. Tell me who knows about what Antifa is. Anti-fascist. Okay? I and a friend of mine, Stefan Varela. Stefan, hold up your hand. Stefan and I, both combat veterans. I was wounded twice in combat in Vietnam. Stefan served his time in Afghanistan and Iraq. Two crazy veterans got together and said, let's take on Bulletin for 3rd Congressional District. Stefan and I teamed up. We teamed up with some other people. We raised over $350,000 in money for commercials and for billboards. Even though she won, I was honored to work with Stefan to set up the first Chicano Political Action Committee in Colorado. The first time. Bulletin named me head of Antifa for Colorado. So you all have the honor of being with the head of Antifa for Colorado. Okay? It all started with Chicano Studies. As my combat veterans, and how many veterans we got in here? I want them to stand up. Lorenzo, my two brothers, combat veterans. They were with me when we all were involved with Mecha and setting up Chicano Studies years ago. I had the honor of serving our country in a war that wasted our people. I came back joined the anti-war movement, but that wasn't enough. I had seen the racism in combat, where our people were being put on the front lines and being sacrificed. Whites, poor whites, Puerto Ricans, blacks, and Chicanos were the ones that were fighting the war, okay? They were on the front lines. We were being wasted. You come back after that war and you want to do something with your life, positive. The anger that I had to put it someplace in a positive way. I met Marty Serna. I met Danny Apadaca. The organization was called Chicano Action. They took me under their wing, and they said, George, we're going up to Denver, and we're going to go see Ronda Gonzalez, and we're going to be with the Crusade for Justice, and we're going to learn about Chicano Studies. When we went up to the Crusade, we met students from UMass, from Mecha, from the other campuses, from University of Northern Colorado, from Fort Collins, from Boulder, from Metro, Denver. And we were all at the same level of reality of saying, look we have to take control of our destiny. Ronda Gonzalez, as you all know, what he spoke, he gave us guidance in regards to saying, look better get our act together. Our community, we have to get our act together because nobody's going to do it for us. We got to do it ourselves. I came back. Chicanos for Action changed to the organization called Mecha. Lorenzo Montoya was one of the first presidents of Mecha. I was lucky in that I had been involved with Mr. Sherman Trotter and Gilbert Martinez, who had run for student government. They had lost by 5 votes. It had been the first time you had a black and Hispanic student government representatives. Student government came in and said, look you guys lost, well, we're going to give you a couple of positions in student government. One of them is Commissioner of Academic Affairs. Gil came in and said, George, you want to be Commissioner of Academic Affairs? I was a sophomore, second year. Commissioner of Academic Affairs? What the hell does a Commissioner of Academic Affairs do? Okay? Yeah, I'll do it. I had no idea what the job was, okay? But they said, George, this is our chance to do something. Get in there and do it. First thing I did as Commissioner of Academic Affairs, I asked for $5,000 to go to California to study the Chicano Studies programs out there. Lorenzo and I and Dr. Cordova went out there. University of San Diego, UCLA, Berkeley. They showed us that they were 10 years ahead of us. They were so advanced in their reality. Music class. Okay, we're going to study Mexican music, but Friday night you're going to Tijuana and you're going to listen to mariachi music out there. You're going to tape it and you're going to come back and make a report. It's called experiential training. You don't talk about it. You don't read it in a book. You go out and you do it. Okay? That blew me away. Second thing they said, audio station. Audio station? What the hell are you talking about? You go into the community, you set up a storefront operation, you bring those kids in because they're going to be the feeder into the Metro program that you're going to be setting up. You bring those kids into college. Lorenzo and I went out there, we seen what was going on. They were showing us stuff. When we came back from California, we had a station wagon. It was a lowrider when we came back because we had books, curriculum. We came back and we said we want to implement Chicano Studies on our campus. Lorenzo took the lead. He went before the curriculum committee. No. We're sitting in one of the rooms over here. We could see in the background Eastwood Heights, otherwise known as Dog Patch. One of the professors gets up and he says, we don't need Chicano Studies. And we're looking at him and we can see Dog Patch behind him. And we're saying, this guy's checked up, man. He don't know what he's talking about. He's a professor. We knew more. We were only students and we could see the reality. He said, there ain't enough Chicano students here to even worry about it because they didn't have enough money to afford to come here. We sat down and I said, look, you don't get Chicano Studies on campus, we're closing down the campus, period. Okay? Oh yeah? I says, yeah. In the meantime, we'd already met with the blacks, we met with the women organization, we met with the, there was the anti-war people. We're gonna have a demonstration, we need your help. We called for the demonstration. It was like 200 people out in front of the library. And let me tell you what, after leading people in combat, I was out one night, I looked back and nobody was behind me. That's the scariest feeling you'll ever have in your life. When I marched from the library to the administration building, I had 200 people behind me. And it was a mixture, not just Chicanos, mixture of students that believed what we were doing was right. We knew what we were doing was right. We put our whole academic future, because had we been arrested, we could have lost our scholarships, I would have been kicked out of school. I would have never graduated. We as a group came in, we met with Dr. Harry Bowes. God bless that man. He says, what's going on? Why are all these students sitting in? I says, Dr. Bowes, if you don't get Chicano Studies on campus, we're closing down the campus and nobody's going to study. He says, what do we got to do to stop it? I said, we presented Chicano Studies in front of their curriculum committee. They refused to do anything. He asked 3 questions. Do you have your curriculum? I said, yes, sir. You got your faculty? I said, yes, sir. You got your students? I said, yes, sir. He says, can you start in the fall? I said, yes, sir. He says, you call off this demonstration, you got Chicano Studies. I said, yes, yes. But we also want the director of financial aid fired. Harry Young, racist, retired military. I went head to head with him. We had to set up the disadvantaged scholarship program. I got $25,000 from the student government so we could recruit disadvantaged students onto this campus because of his racism. So he says, those students you have, the 100 students you have on this disadvantaged scholarship program, we can't have that program anymore because it makes us look bad. Well, that's what remember, is you take care of them and we'll stop the program. That left us with $15,000 left in the account. And guess what we did? We set up Project Adelante, a bio station in the projects on the south side of town. We as students set up a nonprofit organization. We started working with the kids and helping them. In the projects, there's a wall higher and thicker than any prison wall because it's a mental wall. These kids were saying, hey, my dad's in prison, my brother's in prison, hey, ain't no big deal, I'll go to the joint. No, you ain't. You're going to go to college. That's where you're going to go. Remember? These kids were something else. These kids were a trip. Not only were they changed, we were changed. What we ended up doing is we got Project Adelante. They were the first ones to help deal with glue and paint, to take it off, make it illegal to have the stores have it out there. Project Adelante was the first one to set up dealing with juvenile justice to keep these kids from getting incarcerated. We were providing alternative court programs for them. And it goes on. Project Adelante was just one spin-off. I had the opportunity then to leave to go work for the governor's office. I worked for CU Denver. I was assistant to the chancellor. We set up there with the people who I had met in the Chicano movement. Many of them were now not students, but administrators in higher education. We set up Chicanos in Higher Ed. Chicanos in Higher Ed wrote a proposal. We got the Latino Chamber in Denver, and we got the University of Colorado, Denver, CU Denver, Metro, and Community College. We set up the Hispanic Research Institute. That Hispanic Research Institute was a spin-off of Chicano Studies because all of us were all Chicano Studies students. We seen the need for research in our community. 2 programs we set up was a leadership program. The second program we set up was a Hispanic entrepreneurship program, of which I wrote the book on how we can get our young people fast-tracked into business. A man by the name of Mr. Richard Martinez was a student. He came from Pueblo. He was in the program. I I met him at the Children's Bank in Denver. He was the vice president when I met him. I said, how'd you get into this? Hispanic Entrepreneurship Program. He is now the president of the Youth Bank in Denver because of this program, okay? My focus today was to give you a little history and the taste of victory that we had 50 years ago. But what I'm really here today also is to tell you where we're going to go from here. When we set up the Hispanic Research Institute, we were doing things. Dr. Duran did the evaluation of our entrepreneurship program. How many times are you going to get a Hispanic Research Institute on Education and Economic Development set up? How many times are you going to have them actually produce leadership training programs and an entrepreneurship program, as well as doing research on the impact of cigarettes on our community, where these cigarette companies are putting money in to get these young kids to smoke, the same way they're doing it right now with the vaping. Okay? They're killing our community. They're killing us. We have a responsibility to research and study. They're talking about an Otsline Research Center. I love what they're looking at doing, but I want them to take the next step. I want them to do research in health and showing the discrepancies in the utilization of our health services in our community, the disparities that exist. Imagine what happened. COVID showed how many of our people were not even getting vaccinated, okay? That's just with health. I want another one on juvenile justice to show with the incarceration rates that are taking place in our community and these kids that are being sent up when they could have been resolved like we did with Project Adelante and put them in other systems other than incarcerating them. The third one I want is economic development. I've been on the Hispanic Chamber, U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, the Denver Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I sit in the Latino Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. This is what I want. I want this program reproduced. I want us to have fast track and get our young people into business, because right now Pueblo needs young Hispanic entrepreneurs, because when that train comes in from Denver and it's set up over here, we better be ready, or that train's going to pass us by and keep on going and take all that economic reality away. Again, I'm so impressed with everybody tonight. I want to thank you for all being here. I want you to know that we want to take this to the next level. We've committed ourselves. Stefan and I are working with Claudio out of Denver. We're setting up a voter education registration project, because we know we're in a battle against the American Nazi militias. They've already put a price on my head because of the commercials I produced against the militias. My family's been threatened already. I'm a combat veteran. Ain't nothing new. We've been fighting forever, and we're going to fight for our last breath. That is our duty. That is our duty. If we don't take these people on, they're going to do everything they can to suppress us. They attacked our capital on the 6th of January. So my commitment is working with our community, get our young people to vote, get them registered to vote, and then have them run for office and get them ready. I expect all you to help us in this adventure. Thank you very much.
I did take a couple of the Chicano Studies classes. Actually, I took them in high school, and I also took them here. One of them was called Vodka Studies, and I think that was part of that group there. They were under bilingual, bicultural. And if you want to see my transcript, maybe I might show you. I'm so happy now. David Marquez will be sharing his experiences as one of the beginning educators in Chicano Studies, and retired as a leading Chicano professor in our community.
Let me begin with Chicano Studies in Pueblo School District 60 was a direct result of what I like to refer to as the Chicano Wars. The key to our victory in Pueblo was what I call the application of the chinga factor. It was chingazos that won our initial victory in Pueblo. The berets and their student activists shut down the Pueblo school system. There was so much violence and mayhem in the high schools that the system simply could not function. Bomb threats, fights in the halls, fights in the courtyards, fights outside in the quads. I mean, it was just a war zone. Eventually, prominent Anglos, parents, business leaders, professionals, went to the school board and demanded, give the damn Mexicans whatever they want, just make the schools safe again. That was the birth of Chicano Studies, and I was hired in 1974 to take the helm of the program at Central High School. Some of the walkouts, I think Carmen remembers some of this. Probably my favorite story to tell is the walkout that took place at the old Centennial High School. The two sides were aligned. The Chicano kids on one side, the Anglo kids on the other. It looked like a scene from the motion picture Braveheart. One Chicano kid from the west side brought his bugle with him that day, his trumpet. He was in the school band. So all the kids formed a V-shaped wedge behind this little Chicanito. He took out his trumpet and he blew a Hollywood version of Charge that would have made any director proud. He took off screaming with that bugle. And the kids followed behind him. And boom, in a V-wedge, they plunged right into the opposite side. And it was quite a fight, it really was. Some of the kids on the Anglo side had baseball bats, and we later found out that the coaches had opened up the lockers and given those kids bats. That's what we were dealing with at that time. I remember that a lot of the students had been recruiting what we called backup from all the different communities in Pueblo. So there were kids from the east side fighting with the Chicano kids, from the west side. Some of the Anglo kids had reached out to South High School and out to Pueblo County. Well, one of the students from Pueblo County was this huge powerlifter named Dennis Yaklich. He later became an undercover officer in Pueblo. Well, when the fight broke out, Yaklich, who was just this big oak, blonde oak, 6'4", about 260 pounds, was taking Chicano kids, turning them upside down, throwing them in the trash can. I mean, he was just like some kind of Goliath in the field of battle. So a little group of Chicanos, they got together, about 8 or 9 of them, and they formed a huddle, just like a sandlot football game. And they were working up a play. And sure enough, they went out, they surrounded him in a circle, and at the given moment, they all attacked, went forward, and Yaklich went down like a big oak tree. Bang! And they booted him until he left. That was Pueblo in the early 70s. I didn't realize when I was hired in 1974 that I was walking into a war zone. But that essentially is what happened. But those students, the Brown Berets and the community activists that organized them, they were brilliant tacticians. I mean, their strategy worked to perfection. They were following the example of the East LA walkouts that took place in '68. But the application of that strategy in Pueblo, in my opinion, worked even better. It worked even better. It was amazing what they were able to accomplish. And one of the demands that the Berets presented to the school board was the implementation of Chicano Studies. Now, when I arrived at Central High School in 1974, student enrollment exceeded 2,000 students. I mean, the building was bulging at the seams. To the casual observer, Central's diverse student bodies seemed to coexist in a pleasant world of tolerance. A closer look revealed a school within a school that practiced a rigid form of segregation. Leadership positions and members in elite organizations that included student council, cheerleading, pom-pom, girls' cabinet, the Central Times and yearbook were dominated by Anglo students, the ratios often exceeding 90 to 95%. The students enrolled in college prep and honors courses represented another tragic facet of life at Central. This bleak scenario confronted me when I inherited the program from Julian Nava. Immediately upon taking my position, I tried to get the students organized. There was one particular lesson that I called La Política Nueva, the new politics, and I was trying to convey to my students the importance of participating in the political process. If we band together, if we vote together as a group in a city like Pueblo, we can control the political destiny of Pueblo. And of course my students were, yeah, right. Mexicans, I don't think so. So I came up with a novel idea. Every year at the beginning of the school year, the annual staff would put together what was called a student poll. And in the student poll, they would nominate students from the senior class, prettiest, the eyes, most beautiful hair, most handsome, best athlete, best personality, best dancer. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Well, I suggested to my students, and I had 5 sections of Chicano Studies and 150 students at the time. I suggested that we nominate students, senior students, from each of the 5 classes. So we went through all 5 classes. There was one student, Gabe. He had these beautiful blue eyes, all right? We nominated Gabe for prettiest eyes. We had a little Chicanita in Fort Tower from Salao, from Salt Creek, had a beautiful head of hair all the way down to her waist. We nominated her for most beautiful hair. We had some clowns, payasos, we nominated for funniest. I mean, we went all the way through. Best dancer, and you know that the Mexicanos can dance. There were 12 categories. And when they did the tabulation, we swept 6. 6! Now, there were Anglo students that already assumed that they were going to get that place in the yearbook. And boy, were they upset. Most beautiful girl, most handsome man. They were upset. Their parents came to school and they were outraged. So the next day, Bob Trevithick, the then activities director, comes running down to my classroom in a huff. He was flushed, his face was red, and then I thought I was going to have to do some CPR. He said, Dave, what have you done? What have you done? I said, Bob, listen, I was teaching my students the application of political power and how if we vote together as a group, we can influence the Pueblo community. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, well, I guess you're right, Dave, but you've got this school in an uproar. It was one of the best lessons I taught that year. Later, when they had the student council elections, we did the same thing. We did the same thing, and we were successful. That got the ball rolling. Now, about this time, the principal at Central was a man named Halsey Cook. He referred to himself as a humanist. I guess today we'd call him a progressive. He was a good man. Well, a group of students put together a petition, and in that petition, they claimed that I was bringing racism to Central. Racism didn't exist at Central High School until I showed up. I explained to my principal, I simply shined a spotlight on it. It's always been here. Nobody ever took the time to actually recognize what was taking place. Well, he pulls out the petition, and he shows it to me. And unforgivably, not only had students signed it, but there had been faculty members as well. I mean, there were some old school racists on that staff that just, they didn't want to change. They wanted things just the way they were. They wanted their upper division honors classes predominantly white. They wanted student council predominantly white. The Chicano athletes were always welcome on the sports teams, but in terms of leadership positions, royalty positions, annual staff, Central High School times, they wanted things just the way they had always been. He looked at me and he was upset, he was sad, and I thought, well, this is going to be the most short-lived teaching career in history. Because I was, like Carmen had mentioned, a probationary teacher. They could let me go at any time for any reason. But he looked at me and said, "Dave, I just want you to know what we're up against." And he took that petition and he tore it in half and threw it away. That's when I knew it was full steam ahead. We established a Mecha Club later that year. The Mecha Club provided us with a forum to address other issues on campus and in the community. I made contact with Ernie Martinez, who was teaching Chicano Studies at Centennial, and he sponsored the La Familia organization. He was a New Mexico Highlands grad. I contacted Leonard Roybal, who sponsored Los Mestizos at East, an Adams State grad. We got together and brainstormed, and we decided to put the 3 Chicano student organizations together. And collectively, we started an intra-city Chicano Student Council. And we would meet every week. And during those meetings, we would come up with project ideas. One of them was to hold an intra-city dance. All 4 high schools participated. The kids often referred to it as the Chicano prom. And we would have upwards of 900 to 1,000 students at these dances. I mean, it was amazing how successful they were. That really motivated the kids. It inspired them. It made them think, you know what? We are part of this system. We want to be participants in the student activities program. We sponsored banquets. We had big banquets, and we honored Chicano students for athletics, for academics, for community participation. We did all of these things in order to motivate these kids, and they desperately needed to be motivated. They needed some sense of pride, some sense of origin. They needed a grounding, and that's what Chicano Studies provided. Those history classes, those kids loved. They were exposed to a history that they had never heard of before. When I described the role of Chicano veterans during World War II and the Medal of Honor winners, Jose Lopez, who held the record, American combat record for single-handedly killing the largest number of enemy soldiers in a single firefight against the Germans, they were amazed, absolutely amazed at the participation and the contribution Mexican Americans had made. They loved that class. They really loved that class. That was the crucial importance of Chicano Studies. Now, at Central, in addition to Mecha Club, we started 2 other organizations. Los Dorados, and I'll leave these pictures up here, was a group of Chicano athletes. To be in the group, you had to earn a varsity letter and you had to maintain at least a C+ grade point average. I ordered them these special black shirts with Los Dorados emblazoned across the front in flames. I christened them the Dorados. I named them after Pancho Villa's elite cavalry unit. It was his personal bodyguard and the finest fighting men in Villa's División del Norte. The kids were so proud of those shirts. And when they walked the halls of Central High School, the other students looked at them as role models. Someone that they could be proud of. Chicano athletes. And they wanted to emulate them. They wanted to be part of the organization. We also started a group called La Brigada. La Brigada was a gang prevention organization that was established in the 90s during the height of the, what we then called the gang crisis. Things are even worse now. But La Brigada was comprised of gang members that were in my classes. I gave them t-shirts as well, the brigade. And I would take them to the different junior high schools, middle schools within the District 60 system. And they would speak to those kids and tell them what gang life was like and what you were going to be exposed to. And they were really effective. The brigade leader was a man named Ruben. And Ruben held the Central High School bench press record. I mean, this kid was just huge, and everybody respected him. And when he walked on stage, everybody gave him their immediate attention. Those kids were very, very effective. I would get letters from middle school principals thanking me for bringing those students because their personal stories, time spent in jails, time spent in juvie, I mean, all of that had an effect and impact on them. In the final analysis, Chicano Studies worked wonders. It worked miracles in the public school system. It really, really did. And it was all because of those student activists, leaders like Eddie Montour, Edmund Roybal, Marty Cerna, Al Brulé. I mean, they planted the seed. And then they gave us the opportunity to run with it. And we did. It was a golden age for Chicano Studies. I like to call it the renaissance of the Chicano movement. It was a time when the kids were motivated, we were organized, and there was such a sense of pride in those kids. I had a student, my brother-in-law drives a Lyft car in Denver. And he picked up a kid from the airport. Well, you know, he's probably in his late 30s. My brother-in-law always liked to converse with his passengers, and he asked him, you know, where are you from, how old are you, that kind of stuff. And he said, well, I'm from Pueblo. And my brother-in-law said, well, I'm from Pueblo too. And then, of course, the inevitable question, where'd you go to high school? He said, Central High School. And my brother-in-law responded, when? And he gave him the ear, and he said, well, you know, my brother-in-law taught Chicano Studies at Central High School. And the student responded, I took Mr. Marquez's class. He taught me to walk tall and walk proud as a Chicano. And that was the greatest compliment I've ever been paid as a teacher.
Do you see why I have these people here?
And giving us the charge to elevate CSU Pueblo as a Hispanic serving institution. I want to thank Dr. Gonzalez as well for supporting the work as an HSI as well. And most importantly, we want to thank our panel members for all the work that you've done throughout your lives, for starting a movement that has benefited so many of us throughout the generations. We deeply appreciate you. And we have a gift for you as well. Thank you so much.
Your participation. Again, thank you. And thank everybody that helped us make this a reality.
We also have calendars up here for the whole semester.